Welcome to the BDB Platform. This workflow gives you a clear idea on how to go about to predict the yield potential of the crop to increase the sales from an agricultural vertical point of view. The flow to go about to predict the optimal yield potential of the crop is as depicted in the video. Head over to the Apps menu, choose the Data Pipeline plugin. Let's create a new pipeline by clicking on the plus icon. We can now give an appropriate name to the pipeline. And provide a suitable resource allocation according to your requirement. Let's now drag and drop a synthetic data generator component into the pipeline canvas. Let's set the first component as real-time under the Basic Information tab. Let's now set the iteration and batch size for generating the data. We can then upload a sample file to generate a JSON schema automatically and alter them accordingly to suit our requirement. We can add pattern, minimum and maximum dates, etc. The final video which used in the video can be inferred from the document. And now we can save the component properties into the storage. Navigate to the event panel and let add a new event by clicking on the plus symbol. And add event. Increase the number of outputs from 1 to 2 in the Kafka event. Now from the component library we can add the sandbox writer and configure it. In the meta info we can now give an appropriate sandbox name for the file. Choose the file type as JSON and the save mode as append, and save the component. We can configure the DB writer with the hostname, port, username and the password informations. We can now validate the connection and save the component properties to the storage. Let's join the links to connect the events and the components. We should make sure to update the pipeline so that we don't lose the current pipeline flow that was developed. We can track the progress of the pipeline by refreshing the logs and the advanced logs. We can refresh the logs to get the latest updates. You can also get the log status for each component on double-clicking on the component and by heading over to the Logs tab. We can now validate the connection and save the component properties. The status displaying the DB write has processed and is stopping marks the completion of the data generation process, and the generated data is now available in the database. Head over to the Data Center module and then to the Data Sandbox sub-plugin to view file written to the Sandbox writer from the pipeline. Let's now prepare the data using the Dynamic Data Prep feature. And rename the data prep file to a desired name. Let's try performing some transformations like renaming the date column to column. Choose the column you wish to transform and then choose the transformation step. Let's now rename the column date added to date. Let's now delete the target column, kg per hectare. The Data Preparation plugin auto saves the transformations and the steps. Let's now head over to DS Lab plugin and create a new project. Let's now configure the project name. And then configure the project description. And then configure the environment. And set the idle shutdown as 30 minutes, 1 hour, or 2 hours. Remember to save the configurations to create the project. Let's now predict the model using the Smart Auto ML tab by creating an experiment. Add the datasets and choose the Data Sandbox from the drop-down. Choose the sandbox file on which the predictions has to happen by checking the box. From the gear icon, let's create the experiment by configuring the experiment and the target column to be predicted. Select the experiment type as classification and click on Done. The model is running on the background and the status can be observed as started in the beginning. The status is then observed to be changed as running while the model is running in the backend. Now the status is completed and we can view the report. For the target column yield potential, kg per hectare, the model automatically predicted the weighted ensemble as the best fit model. We need to now register the model. Head over to the Model tab, choose All from the drop-down, and from the project created click on the Register icon to register the model. Now let's head over to the Data Pipeline plugin. From the Components library, let's drag and drop the Sandbox Reader component into the pipeline canvas. And configure the component in the basic information and meta information. And save the component properties. Let's now add an event from the event panel, and by clicking on the plus icon, add an event. Followed by the data preparation component and configure with the details from the data preparation plugin. And save the component properties. And add an event followed by the data preparation component. Let's now add the AutoML Runner component and configure with the files from the DSLab plugin. Choose the project name and the model name automatically appears as configured in the DSLab module. Let's now add an event after the AutoML Runner component. Let's realign the component and the event and join the links to connect them. Drag and drop the DB Writer component from the component library to the pipeline canvas. Let's now finally write the data into the DB Writer and configure the component with the host, port, username, password, database, table name, driver, and the save mode. Now validate the connection and save the properties of the component. Link the component to the event and update the pipeline. We can track the status of the logs and the advanced logs and refresh the logs to receive the latest log status update. We can now deactivate the pipeline since the write is done. Head over to the Data Center plugin. Choose the Data Sandbox sub-plugin. Give an appropriate sandbox name and upload the file into the sandbox. Let's now create a data store on top of the data sandbox to create a business story. The data store created is crop yield predicted. Let's now create a business story for the predicted data. Choose the data store created and create a story. Let's choose the chart initially and double-click on the column to be plotted. From the settings icon, we can give a title or a description. Click on the three dots to add the tooltips for the columns. As the display name. and save the view. Let's create a new view to determine the total crops KPI tile. And add the title and description. We can also set the title from the Properties tab and enter the label to be displayed, as shown in the video. In the same fashion, let's create another KPI tile to determine the total supplier count. Now enter the title and description for the chart created. And save the view. Let's create another view to determine the yield potential in kg per hectare over time. We can rename the tooltip name. And save the view. Remember to save the story so that we do not lose any KPIs that were created. Let's add the label name for the KPI tile as total seed varieties. Let's create another view to determine the total prediction by trend in months. Save the view. Let's create another view to determine the disease resistance by the yield potential that still persists for the crops. We can now save the view. Let's create another view to determine the variety name by their respective yield potential per kg per hectare. Save the view. Let's create another view to compare the planting depth in centimeters versus the potential crop yield. Save the view. Let's create another view to determine the crop-wise variety count and the yield potential predicted. Save the view. Let's realign the chart to fit in the UI. Let's create another KPI tile by trend to determine the total maturity period in days by months as the trend. Let's create another KPI to determine the seed information by using the columns that provides all the seed information in a glance. Let's rename the tooltips and column names for all the columns. and save the view to update the changes. We can now alter the whole story by adding a pop of colors according to match your requirements. Similarly, the precisions can be added for the KPI tile charts. The UI can be similarly altered to suit the background and the remaining charts as shown in the workflow. The colors of the mixed chart can be altered accordingly to beautify the UI. And voila! The finished look of your business story is here. Thank you. I hope now you will be able to create an end-to-end workflow in a jiffy using the BDB platform.